Okay, everybody, welcome back. So in this last section here, we're going to take a look at our master bus one last time, and I'm going to show you a couple other analog style plugins that you can use to kind of, again, give this mix a little bit more vibe, a little bit more color, just to kind of finish it off the best we can here. So if we take a look at, we'll play back this little kind of section of music here, and we'll open up our master bus, and we'll take a look at our plugins to make sure that we're not clipping anything, we're not hitting anything too hard. Again, we've been doing this throughout every section. We're kind of just retweaking our master bus a little bit, our compressor, make sure we're not over compressing. And then I'll show you a couple other plugins that you may want to check out. So here we go.
As far as I can remember, you never made a single effort to make me not feel segregated. The fact of me being different is to you just another symptom. You can accept how I'm not what you expected. You can stand, I smoke and drink, and that I'm not what you may think.
Okay, so it looks pretty good. We're not killing anything. You heard as I turned off the SSL compressor by waves here, you can kind of feel the mix go a little flat, right? This thing sounds really, really good. It's subtle, but it has a lot of nice richness and a lot of tightness to the mix. Also, do take notice that where our final output at our master fader is right around -5, -6 dB, which is where we wanted to end up, as I said way back in the beginning of this series. Starting off at about a -10, -12 before we got all our processing. We're going to end up around a -5, -6, which is great. That's perfect for us to go to mastering. So the one plugin I want to show you here, or there's a couple I want to show you, but this one here we're going to take a look at. Remember early on we had an empty virtual mix rack that we put on at the beginning of the mix, and I said I want to maybe at the end of the mix add some stuff. Well, here's one plugin I want to add here which isn't turned on yet. This is the one of 3 plugins in the Virtual Tube collection by Slate Digital. This is a wonderful plugin. This comes with 3 500 series modules. The one you see before you is called the Hollywood, and they also make, along with this, when you get this plugin, they make what's called the London, and they also make what's called the New York. Okay, the difference between the 3 is they all have, these are saturators. They add a lot of color and vibe. The London sounds a lot more like those old 60 kind of things where it really is kind of more of a warm sound, a little bit more darker, in my opinion. The New York has a little bit more of a upper mid-range and bump to it, a little bit more open on the upper mid-range. The Hollywood tends to have the most color of the 3. We could try all of them here just for the heck of it. But the way these things are basically laid out is the same. You have a preamp model and a console model. In this particular section, we're going to use it on the console part of this plugin. If you were to use this as maybe, you can use this as maybe a preamp at the very first insert of your chain on your individual tracks. We didn't do that here, but you could. And then you have a normal and a push mode. Push is going to push more, more signal into the plugin, which means you're going to get a little bit more color, a little bit more harmonic distortion, which is what I want. We have a mix button here, which I'm going to put 100%. Our high pass frequency right now I'm just going to leave off, and our output I'm going to leave at 0. And then we just turn up how much saturation we want. Now anything above 12 o'clock, you'll start to see the red light come on. It'll start clipping. Which again, let's say if you're using this on the bass guitar track on the insert, you may want to push it a little more to get a little bit of grit. You can use it that way, or like with the snare. But on a mix bus, we're not gonna add too much. Now the thing about these plugins, they sound great, but you can easily overdo it, so you need to be careful. So if I were to turn off these other 2 and just listen to the London, and I'll set up all of them the same way, and we'll just compare them back and forth. I kind of like the Hollywood on this mix, but I want you to hear both. So that's what we're going to do here. And we're listening right now to the London. And then after we play back the passage a little bit, I'll just take it away by shutting it off. Listen for the low ends. Listen for the upper mid-range. Where the thing, again, it just adds a little something. The mix will collapse a little bit without it. It just adds a little bit of color, a little bit of nice vibe to it. So here's with it on.
I don't know how this will be. I always thought I'd never lose you. What you get is what you'll see. I won't change just to suit you. No dress blowing in the wind. You'll see me running through the hayfields. That's your dream, but that's not me. I won't change just to suit you.
Okay, adds a lot of nice richness to it. I hope you can hear that over the video. Let's try the New York and see what the New York does with the same settings.
As far as I can remember, effort to make me not feel segregated. The fact of me being different is to you just another symptom. You can accept how I'm not what you expected.
Okay, so the New York to my ear sounds like you get a little bit more opened on the top end clarity, and it's a little less on the bottom ends, where the London is a lot more thick on the bottom end, which in this track I think is a little too much. Now let's listen to the Hollywood.
As far as I can remember, you never made a single effort to make me not feel segregated. The fact of me being different is to you just another symptom. You can accept how I'm not what you expected. You can stand, I smoke and drink, and that I'm not what you may think. I don't know how this will be. I always thought I'd never lose you. What you get is what you'll see. I want you.
Okay, so there's a difference between the three. I think I'm going to use the New York on this. I think even the Hollywood ends a little bit too much low ends. Now, you can always go back and turn down the bass guitar a little bit. You can kind of balance it. But, you know, again, for demonstration purposes, I just want to show you how these things can just add a little more color, a little bit more vibe, this analog saturator, okay? Now, we can also follow this up with something like an exciter, which is a little different than this kind of tube collection plugin called Revival by Slate. This is a great plugin as well. It's got two knobs, thickness and shimmer, low and high. Again, you got to be careful with this. You don't want this thing to get too boomy. But once again, it can add just a little bit of niceness. So let's see.
No dress blowing in the wind. See me running through the hayfields. That's your dream, but that's not me. I want shades, stars to suit you. As far as I can remember, you never made a single effort to make me not feel segregated. The fact of me being different is to you just another symptom. You can accept how I'm not what you expected. You can stand us.
So on their own, they just add a little bit. When you take them away together as a pair, you can hear how much it enhances the mix. Again, we're using it very subtly, just a little bit of shimmer, a little bit of thickness. Again, it's easy to overdo it with these plugins. So typically I add these plugins after, at the very end, like I'm doing now. And then before I would print this mix and send it, I would let it sit for a few hours. I would go take a break, come back after a couple of hours and re-listen. And then tweak these again. Because usually what you'll find when you're doing this in the moment and you've been mixing for a while, you'll tend to add too much of this stuff because your ears get a little tired. And in order to hear it, you turn these up too much and then you find out it's too much. Again, these plugins are supposed to be subtle. Again, the message has been very small increments along the way. But you can hear, and again, I'll do this one last time. I'll play this back and I'll just bypass the whole plugin. So we're going to bypass both at the same time. And just hear how it just gives a little bit more fullness and thickness to the track. So we'll start with it off and then we'll bring it in.
As far as I can remember, you never made a single effort to make me not feel segregated. The fact of me being different is to you just another symptom. You can accept how I'm not what you expected. You can stand, I smoke and drink, and that I'm not what you may think.
Okay, so there you go. So there's a couple of plugins. The New York, part of the Virtual Tube Collection by Slate Digital, and Revival by Slate Digital as well. There's other plugins in this VMR rack, which is really good as well. We didn't check out in this series the CS Lift. The Custom Series Lift is another kind of similar to Revival. It's a parallel EQ with some high lift and low lift. Again, similar to the Revival, but slightly different. That's another great plugin by them. You know, the Slate Digital stuff, and we talked about this earlier in the series, that for the bang for the buck, you really can't beat the Slate Digital stuff. And if you don't have any analog style plugins, one thing to really consider is the Everything Bundle by Slate Digital. Depending on when you're watching this video, I don't know if those will still be available, but if you're watching this in the year 2017, 2018, you may want to go check them out, because for the money, you get a ton of great sounding plugins, and we've used a lot of them throughout this series. So that is the Master Bus, and that is going to wrap it up for this series. So come on back for the last video where I'll give you some of my final thoughts and a few tips and things, and we'll just do a quick overview of what we learned throughout this series. So come on back for the next video.